understand why I can't. Oh, that's why. I see why. I see the problem. Okay, now I should be able to hear you. Marsha, you want to give me a sound check? You can hear me?
Sure can. You can hear me?
Okay, yeah, perfect. Now everything is
And
working.
Did you turn on your recorder?
Thank you. I would have forgotten. Okay, now the recorder is on. Baruch Hashem. So that's on, and this is on, and this is streaming. So everything seems to be working. Okay, very good. Good to see everyone. Let me just move this screen back here so I can see. Okay. So we're holding in Sefer Tehillim, we're holding in Perek Chav Gimel. My apologies that we missed last week. It was technical problems. My internet went down, and the stream just wasn't working. So, this Perek, of course, every Perek in Tehillim is a beautiful Perek, but this Perek is an exceptionally well-known Perek. It's something that everybody, not everybody, but many people sing it by Shalosh Seudais, sing it 3 times even, and it's a very, very, very well-known kapitel. Mizmar LeDavid, it's a song for Dovid HaMelech. Hashem ro'i loy echsar. Hashem is my ro'i, Hashem is my shepherd, and therefore loy echsar. I will not be lacking anything. Okay, Richard. Hi, good to see you. Okay, Richard, you should be in. Very good. Okay. So, Hashem ro'i loy echsar, Hashem is my shepherd, and therefore loy echsar, I will not lack for anything. Now, before we even begin, there's a very interesting Gemara, and I think it's in Psachim. Yeah, there's a Gemara in Psachim. Rashi brings it down over here. And the Gemara in Psachim tells us that we have certain kapitlach, certain chapters in Tehillim that begin LeDavid Mizmar. For David there was a song. And then we have other kapitlach like this one that begin Mizmar LeDavid, a song for Dovid HaMelech. And the Gemara in Psachim tells us that there's a critical difference between the two. The Gemara says that when it says LeDavid Mizmar means that first the Shechina, first the divine presence was Shoira on Dovid HaMelech. Dovid HaMelech had Ruach HaKodesh, and from that Ruach HaKodesh, he wrote that Mizmar. Mizmar LeDavid works the other way. Mizmar LeDavid means that Dovid HaMelech sang a particular song. He composed this kapitel of Tehillim, and then from that shira, the Ruach HaKodesh came and rested on Dovid HaMelech. In the words of Rashi in Psachim, Rashi says in Psachim, he says, I wrote down the lashon of Rashi. Where is it? Mitoich HaMizmar, from singing that song, Ba Shechina LeDavid. The Shechina came to Dovid HaMelech as a result of the Mizmar. So I think what we see from that the concepts and the ideas that are brought down in this Mizmar, the ideas that Dovid HaMelech expresses in this kapitel of Tehillim, are concepts that are capable of bringing somebody to Ruach HaKodesh. And that's a very, very powerful thing. And when I say it's a powerful thing, I don't mean only that it's powerful on face value, meaning, wow, this sounds like such a powerful idea. You mean these concepts could bring you to Ruach HaKodesh? But I tend to look at it in another way as well. And that is that it's always a little bit of an open question to us. It's always something that's somewhat difficult for us to understand. Throughout the history of Klal Yisroel, we see people that reached the Madrega of Ruach HaKodesh. We see people that became very, very big. And it's sometimes very difficult for us to understand, how did it happen? What brought them to that level? For example, we have a Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was found in the Ya'ar. He was found in the river. He was brought up in Beis Parai. He was brought up by the daughter of Parai. Yes, he was given to his mother. His mother was his nursemaid. and it seems that his mother definitely was very active in his chinuch, but still, he became a Moshe Rabbeinu. What is it that brings these people? You know, the Torah Kedosha doesn't tell us that, wow, Moshe Rabbeinu spent Yom V'Layla in the Beis Medrash, and that's how he became a Moshe Rabbeinu. The Torah Kedosha really doesn't tell us. Even by Dovid HaMelech. Dovid HaMelech, all we know about Dovid HaMelech, prior to his becoming king, prior to the story of David and Goliath, prior to that, we know that he was a shepherd. But it doesn't tell us, we don't know anything else all that much about Dovid HaMelech. What made Dovid HaMelech Dovid HaMelech? But over here in this kapitel, we see something. Here in this kapitel, we see Mizmar LeDavid. We see that the concepts of this Mizmar brought Dovid HaMelech to Ruach HaKodesh. And if so, it behooves us to take a very, very careful look at the concepts that are expressed in this Mizmar and see what are these ideas that could bring somebody to Ruach HaKodesh. So, the very first thing we have here in this kapitel is Hashem Roi. Dovid HaMelech says, Hashem is my shepherd. Now, you know, a shepherd is a very interesting thing. You know, again, we talk about, I just mentioned Moshe Rabbeinu, and we're talking about Dovid HaMelech. We know that Moshe Rabbeinu, before the story with the sneh on Har Sinai, before Hashem appeared to Moshe Rabbeinu was a shepherd. He was shepherding the sheep of Yisroel. And not only that, but we know that he came to Har Sinai and he came to the sneh because he was shepherding the sheep. And that's where he brought the sheep. We know that Dovid HaMelech was a shepherd. We know that the Shvatim, when they came down to Mitzrayim, the Shiftei Ka, the sons of Yaakov Avinu, they said, Royei Tzoyin Anu. They were shepherds. And that's why they were even in Shechem, when it came to the story of Bechiras Yosef, when they sold Yosef. Why were they in Shechem? Because they were shepherding. So it seems that in our history, shepherding sheep and big people seem to go together. Why is that? So I always thought, and I think this idea was expressed to me by Rabbeim over the years when I was younger, somehow the concept of shepherding sheep, it trains the individual in how to care for something that requires care. In order to be a shepherd, you have to dedicate yourself to caring for these helpless sheep, not only helpless sheep, but not very smart sheep. You know what they say, if you want to get 1,000 sheep to commit suicide, you get one sheep to jump off the cliff and all the other sheep follow. So the sheep, in many ways, are somehow not very bright. And they're helpless, and they need a lot of care. So the shepherd has to completely dedicate himself to the care of the sheep. We know that Yaakov Avinu, when he was shepherding the sheep of Lavan, Yaakov Avinu grows into great detail when he's talking to Lavan. He says all the difficulties that he had doing the job of shepherding. He says, I did it in the heat of the day and I did it in the frost of the night. So you see that shepherding is something that requires a tremendous amount of work. I know there's the famous book, Go My Son, about the Yid, I forgot his first name, Shapiro, who spent the war years as a teenager in Soviet Russia. And he was working on a collective farm, and he asked that he wants to be the shepherd. And when he first asked for that job, they laughed at him. They said, you think a shepherd is an easy job. You think shepherding is, you get to sit out in the field all day and be lazy. You don't realize what a demanding job it is. And then they proceeded to explain to him what a difficult job shepherding is. So I always thought that the reason why a melech, a leader, has to be a shepherd, or has to, but very often was a shepherd first, was because he had to learn. You're going to be the leader of Klal Yisroel. You have to know what it means to care for items, for beings that are under your charge. You're going to have to lead your subjects. Leading the subjects of Klal Yisroel, being a melech of Klal Yisroel, is not bossing people around. It's not lording over them. It's caring for them. It's dedicating your life to them. It's raising them up and leading them. So if you want to be a Melech on Klal Yisroel, you want to be a Moshe Rabbeinu, you want to be a Dovid HaMelech, you have to be a shepherd first. That's the way I always understood it. But now, I look at this kapitel in Tehillim, and I have a different perspective. And I think Moshe Rabbeinu, Dovid HaMelech, they had to be shepherds before they could be Malachim on Klal Yisroel, because they had to learn true emunah and bitachon. And what I mean by that is, they had to see how a shepherd takes care of his flock in order to truly appreciate and understand how the Ribbono Shel Olam takes care of Klal Yisroel. And in order to be a Melech, in order to be a Melech Yisrael, you want to be a leader of Klal Yisrael, forget that you have to know how to lead the Am. You have to be able to appreciate, and you have to be able to bring Klal Yisrael to a true appreciation of how the Ribbono Shel Olam is a shepherd on Klal Yisrael, and what it means that the Ribbono Shel Olam takes care of Klal Yisrael all the time. And that's what Dovid HaMelech is showing us here in this kapitel. Dovid HaMelech says, Hashem roi loy echsar. And if you take a look in the Mitzudas over here, Mitzudas says, Hashem roi, Hashem is my shepherd, loy echsar, I will not lack for anything, says the Mitzudas, al ki Hashem roya oisi, since Hashem is my shepherd, im kain, if so, bevadai loy eya chaser me'uma. I certainly will not be lacking anything. Ki hakol biyadai, because everything is in his hands. What's the Mitzudas telling me here? The Mitzudas is telling me a very powerful lesson. The shepherd is totally dedicated to the care of the sheep. But still in all, sometimes something could happen to the sheep. The shepherd could be shepherding the sheep. Now, it's a given that the shepherd is going to do everything that he possibly can for the sheep, and he's going to do everything that he possibly can to protect them and care for them. That's a given. That's his job. That's his responsibility. That's what he's doing. The problem is, sometimes there's something that's beyond the control of the shepherd. If one wolf comes to attack the flock, so the shepherd could chase off a wolf. But what if 2 wolves come? So maybe the shepherd and his dog. What if 3 wolves come? Maybe he'll still be able to do it. What if a whole pack of coyotes come? Coyotes are pack hunters. They're very smart. One comes from this side to distract you. One comes from that side to draw off the dog. So sometimes something happens that is beyond the control of the shepherd. Or, even more pashut, it's very nice that the shepherd wants to care for the sheep. But what's the shepherd going to do if there's a drought and there's no grass? The shepherd can't create grass. There's nothing he can do. But if the Ribbono Shel Olam is the shepherd, so then the Mitzuda says, if the Ribbono Shel Olam is the shepherd, so the shepherd is totally dedicated to the care of the flock, and hakol biyadai, everything is in his hands. There is nothing that's beyond the control of the Ribbono Shel Olam. Now you'll tell me, but what if the Ribbono Shel Olam doesn't want to care for the flock? Then he's not a roya. That's not called a roya. That's not called a shepherd. The shepherd is there to care for the flock. That's what he's there for. So by calling the Ribbono Shel Olam the shepherd of Klal Yisroel, that's exactly what Dovid HaMelech is telling you. Dovid HaMelech is saying, I recognize that the Ribbono Shel Olam is the shepherd. And the Ribbono Shel Olam is totally dedicated and totally there for us to take care for us every second of every minute of every hour of every day of every week of every month of every year of your whole life. And what are you worried about? You're worried that there's something that's beyond his control? There is nothing that's beyond his control. So that's why Dovid HaMelech says, Lo yechsar, I will not lack. I will not lack. Like the Mitzudas uses the lashon, bivadai. I certainly will not be lacking anything because the Ribbono Shel Olam is my shepherd and he has everything. So that's the first realization The first realization is a realization of the Rabbeinu Shalom is taking care of you every second, every step of the way, and therefore it is a fact. Loi echsar. I will not lack. Now, having said that, you'll ask the question, what do you mean? You're saying with certainty that I will not lack? It will never happen. But sometimes you see somebody that does lack. What do you mean? What do you mean he will not lack? You see a poor person, a good person who seems to be a poor person, seems to be lacking. So how do you understand that? How do you jive that with Hashem Roi Lo Yachzor? The answer to that is why this pasuk is the first pasuk in the kapitel, but the kapitel continues. There's a lot more to this kapitel than just that pasuk. So the kapitel continues, and it says, Bin ois desha, in beautiful green pastures, in beautiful. The word bin ois is a little bit of a difficult word. If you look in the Metzudas Tzion, the Metzudas Tzion defines the word bin ois inyan modar, some type of a shelter or the word is escaping me, a habitat. So included in that would be a pasture. So he is using the word, it comes from naveh or neveh. It means some kind of a habitat. So bin ois deshe. But Reb Shamshon Raphael Hirsch, who was a linguist, he also says that bin ois comes from the shirish of noeh, of beautiful. So he says bin ois deshe, in beautiful, lush pastures. Deshe is green vegetation. Bin ois deshe yarbitzeni. The Rabbeinu Shalom will have me lie down and rest in beautiful, lush green pastures. Al mei menuchos, alongside tranquil, calm, clear waters, Yenahaleni, he will lead me. Okay, very poetic, beautiful pasuk. What does it mean? So I think we have to break the pasuk in two. Bin ois deshe yarbitzeni. The Rabbeinu Shalom will have me lie down at rest in beautiful, lush green pastures. What does that mean? He'll have me lie down. Especially in contrast to the end of the pasuk, where in the pasuk it says, alongside calm waters, Yenahaleni, he will lead me. So that means that in the end of the pasuk, I'm traveling. In the end of the pasuk, I'm moving. In the beginning of the pasuk, I'm yarbitzeni, I'm at rest, I'm lying down. So I think that a person can look at his life, and at different periods in his life, people have two different types of periods in their life, two different types of existence or stages that people go through. Sometimes there's yarbitzeni. Yarbitzeni, the way I understand it, is a person at any given time finds himself in a particular situation in life, a particular matzav. In other words, a person looks at his life and he says, right now I'm living in Staten Island, or right now I'm living in Edison, New Jersey. I'm part of this neighborhood. I'm part of this particular kehillah. I'm part of this group. I have this particular job. So if somebody would stop a person and ask him, oh, I haven't seen you in years. What's going on in your life? What are you up to? So a person will give a description of the situation that he finds himself in that tekufa. And it's going to include where he lives, the job that he has, the social circle that he's part of, maybe the shul that he davens in, and that's the matziv, that's the situation that he finds himself in. Sometimes, a person might not be very happy with the matziv that he's in. Sometimes a person looks at his matziv and he says, I wish I could change it. I wish I wasn't living in this kind of neighborhood. I wish I was living in a different neighborhood. I wish I was living in a neighborhood that was more X. Sometimes it's even frumkeit reasons. A person says, I'm in this neighborhood. I wish I was in I'm using labels, but I don't mean to use these labels to say that this is better than that. I'm just using labels that people throw around in the vernacular of our times. One person says, I wish I was living in a more yeshivish neighborhood. Another person says, I wish I was living in a more chassidish neighborhood. Another person says, I wish I had a different kind of job. The job that I have right now, if only I was working in a frumma office, I'm working amongst goyim. I wish I had the opportunity to work in a more frumma office. So very often a person expresses a wish that he could change his matziv, maybe even for reasons that he thinks are good reasons. He wants to better his matziv. But the bottom line is, what he's doing is, he has a dissatisfaction with the matziv that he's in, and he wishes he could change the matziv to something else. I'm telling you that what this pasuk is saying is, bin ois deshe yarbit seini. The matziv that you are established in at any given moment in your life, that's yarbit seini. The Rebbeinu Shalom has laid you down. You're at rest in that matziv. Sometimes the matziv lasts for 10 years. I lived in Edison, if I remember correctly, I think it was 10 years. So for 10 years, that was my matziv. My matziv was living over there with the involvements and peripheral things that came together with that. So that was one matziv. That was a matziv that lasted for a certain tkufa. 10 years is a significant amount of time. Bin ois deshe yarbitzeni. Don't think that the grass is greener on the other side. It's not. Bin ois deshe yarbitzeni. Dovid HaMelech says, the Rebbeinu Shalom has me lie down in beautiful, lush, green pastures. The grass is green right here. Wherever the Rebbeinu Shalom put you, whatever that matziv is, that matziv was handcrafted by the Rebbeinu Shalom for you for that particular time. That is exactly where you belong. And in that matziv, there are challenges for you to live up to. There are opportunities for you to take advantage of. There are rooms for growth that you need to find. There are ways for you to shine. There are ways for you to influence those around you. Don't sit and think, I wish I was in a different matziv. I wish I was in a different matziv. I wish I was in a different matziv. And you have your eyes looking at something else. You have your eyes looking at a different situation that you're not in. No, you have to live in the moment that you're in. You have to live in the matziv that you're in. And you have to do it with a realization and an appreciation and an acceptance of the fact that that's exactly where the Rebbeinu Shalom put you. And he did it for his reasons, which are good reasons. So, bin ois deshe yarbitzeni. And Dovid HaMelech was uniquely able to appreciate this. As a matter of fact, the Malbim over here on this kapitel, and I'm not really going to go into the Malbim, but the Malbim, in his beauty, in his beautiful way, the Malbim goes through this kapitel, and the Malbim says that Dovid HaMelech is expressly speaking about different phases of his life. Dovid HaMelech says that the best time of his life was the years that he was a shepherd before he became melech. When he was a shepherd, he was able to go out with the sheep. He was able to dedicate himself all day long to avodas Hashem without distractions, without the burden of malucha and everything that comes with it. And yet, Dovid HaMelech said, "Bin ois deshe yarbitzeni." Dovid HaMelech is not famous for the years that he was a shepherd. We don't talk about Malchus Beis David from the years that he was a shepherd. Dovid HaMelech's destiny was Malchus Beis David. So Dovid HaMelech appreciated, and he said, "Bin ois deshe yarbitzeni." Wherever the Rebbeinu Shalom put me at that stage, that was the stage that I needed then. When I was a shepherd, Baruch Hashem, I was able to take advantage of that opportunity. But that maybe was only preparation of becoming a melech. I wouldn't have been the same melech that I became if I didn't have those years of shepherding. But now I have to be a melech. Now is my time to be the melech. So now is what I have to do now. So that's been Oisdesha Yarbitzeni. But then the pasuk says you also have to know Al mei menuchais yinahaleni. Sometimes the Rebbeinu Shalom changes your matziv. And not only sometimes does the Rebbeinu Shalom change your matziv, sometimes the Rebbeinu Shalom makes you travel. Sometimes the Rebbeinu Shalom has you traveling from matziv to matziv, and you're not even sure exactly what your matziv right now is. You're on the way. You're, as we'd say in Yiddish, you're oif derech. You're traveling. Somehow you're not even established right now. You're between here, between there. I'm not sure where I am. I'm not really sure what my matziv is. You should know, says the pasuk, that is almei menuchais. What does almei menuchais mean? Almei menuchais, the Metzudas over here, the Metzudas Dovid says, mei menuchais, which I translated as tranquil or calm water. Says the Metzudas, ki mayim hanochim, still water, like the water of a lake, which is relatively still. Ki mayim hanochim, calm, tranquil, still water, hemot salulim, they tend to be clear. Masha'en ken aroitzfim, swiftly flowing water is not that way. Ki yigrishu meimav refesh vatit. We know that when water runs, those of you who live in Edison, go down to the Raritan after a storm, after a heavy rain, go down to the Raritan, and you'll see that the Raritan River turns brown. Why does it turn brown? Because when the river gets so full and it's rushing, it stirs up all of the sediment and all of the mud from the river bottom, and the whole river turns muddy. When the water is relatively calm, the water is clean. So the Dovid HaMelech says, Al mei menuchais yinahaleni. The Rebbeinu Shalom leads me alongside tranquil, calm, clear waters. What I think that means is, very often, when somebody is, like I said, being led around, when the Rebbeinu Shalom is moving somebody around and making him travel from place to place, so now he's rushing, and sometimes that stirs up sediment. Sometimes his waters become muddied. What does that mean? He becomes agitated. He becomes aggravated. He becomes unsettled. I don't know what's going on. I don't know where I am. I don't know what to do with myself. I feel very unsettled. Dovid HaMelech says, if you come with the realization that it's Yinahaleni, if you come with the realization that the Rebbeinu Shalom is the one that's leading me, the Rebbeinu Shalom is the one that's moving me around from place to place, then you can have menuchos. Then you don't have to become unsettled. Then you can handle it all with equanimity. And there's a beautiful example that I always like to give of that. I want to try to be sure that I quote the Rashi correctly. We find by Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu grows up in the house of Parai. And then it says, Vayhi bayamim ahem, Vayigdal Moshe. Rashi says, Vayigdal Moshe. Moshe became big. Rashi says, what does that mean? It says that he became a person of authority. The Paroi appointed him as an officer. So Vayetze Alechav, he went out to see what's going on with Klal Yisroel. Vayar b'sivloisam, he saw them in their servitude. Vayarish Mitzri Maki Ishivri Me'echav. He saw that a Mitzri, a taskmaster, was beating a Yid. So we know the story goes that Moshe Rabbeinu went and he killed that Mitzri. He killed the Mitzri. Parai found out about it. They snitched on Moshe Rabbeinu. So Parai found out that Moshe Rabbeinu killed a Mitzri. So what did he do? He chased him out of Mitzrayim. He didn't chase him out of Mitzrayim. He brought him to justice, and he decided that he was Chayiv Misa, and he had the executioner try to kill Moshe Rabbeinu, and it didn't work. The sword didn't bite on Moshe Rabbeinu's neck. Moshe Rabbeinu was able to run away. It says that the guards all became blind. Moshe Rabbeinu was able to run away, and now Moshe Rabbeinu became a fugitive from justice, and he winds up in Midian. He winds up in the country of Midian. Okay, what does the pasuk say? It says, "Vayivrach Moshe mipnei Paroi." Moshe Rabbeinu ran away from Paroi. Vayeshev be'eretz Midian. So he settled in the land of Midian. Vayeshev al habe'er. And he sat by the well. He sat by the well. Okay. So apparently, he ran to Midian, and he set himself up at the well. He went to the well. Says Rashi, why did Moshe Rabbeinu go to the well? Did he go to the well because he was thirsty and he needed a drink? Rashi says, no. You know why he went to the well? Lamad mi Yaakov. He learned the lesson from Yaakov Avinu. Sheniz David lo zivugai min habe'er. Yaakov Avinu found himself in a very similar situation. Yaakov Avinu found himself in a situation where he had to run away from Esav. When he had to run away from Esav, he went to Lavan, and he went to the Be'er. And by the Be'er is where he found Rachel. So, by the Be'er is, where he found Rachel. And ultimately Leah. So, he found his wives by the Be'er. Okay. So, Moshe Rabbeinu said, all right, I have to go to Midian. I'm running away from Parai. I'm going to the Midian. I'll go to the Be'er. I'll get married. Now, it sounds all very nice. It sounds very interesting. If you were writing a book, maybe you'd write it this way. But try to put yourself in Moshe Rabbeinu's shoes for a minute. Moshe Rabbeinu grew up in Beis Parai. He was appointed as a person of authority, as an officer in Parai's household. So now he's royalty, and he has a high government position. He goes out to see what's going on by Klal Yisroel. He kills a Mitzri. Now, he thought that he was going to be in a position to help Klal Yisroel. He thought, here I am, I'm a Yid, I'm royalty, I'm in Parai's household, I'm in a position of authority, I'll use my position to help Klal Yisroel. What happens? He gets himself thrown out of Mitzrayim. Now he's thrown out of Mitzrayim. Parai's executioners have just tried to kill him. He's a fugitive from justice. He's on the lam. He runs to Midian, and he says, oh, how nice. I'll go to the Be'er and I'll get married. Now, how many of you would be thinking at that point in time, I'm going to go to the well and get married? It sounds almost ludicrous when you put it that way. But the reason it's not ludicrous is because Moshe Rabbeinu learned this lesson of Almei Menuchos Yenahaleni. What Moshe Rabbeinu learned was, wherever the Ribbono Shel Olam leads me, wherever I find myself, is the Ribbono Shel Olam leading me. I thought that the place for me to be was in Mitzrayim and to use my position to help Klal Yisroel. Weiss dechois, it turns out that that's not true. Turns out the Ribbono Shel Olam said, no, that's not what you're supposed to be doing right now. And instead, what did the Ribbono Shel Olam do? The Ribbono Shel Olam led me to Midian. Now I'm in Midian. Okay, what am I supposed to do in Midian? Obviously, the Ribbono Shel Olam brought me into Midian. There's something for me to do. Well, I'm no youngster, and I'm running away. So who do I know that this happened to? Well, it happened to Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu had to run away. And you know what? He got married. I'm not a youngster. I should get married. I should have a family. So you know what? I'll go to the Be'er. You get your shidduch by the Be'er. So he went to the Be'er, and guess what? That's exactly what happened. He met Tzipora and he got married. And it's a good thing that he got married then, because he had 2 kids. And that's when he had them. He got those two kids from going to the Be'er and meeting Tzipora and having Gershom and Eliezer while he was in Midian. And after that, he was busy with taking the Yidden out of Mitzrayim. And after that, after Kabbalah's HaTorah, the Rebbeinu Shalom, it was time for him to separate from his wife. He had to separate from his wife. He wouldn't have had kids. So he had kids, he had Gershom and Eliezer, because he had that equanimity and he had that realization. He was able to stay calm. He was able to be clear. He didn't get unsettled. He didn't get panicked. He didn't get all agitated. I don't know what to do with myself. No, he stayed perfectly calm. And he realized in every situation there's something for me to do. And he chapped what there was for him to do in that situation in Midian. And he did it. And it worked out well. So that's, I think, this pasuk. The next pasuk, Dovid HaMelech says, Nafshi Yeshovev. Now, the word Yeshovev is an interesting word. The Mitzudais, which is always where we turn to first in Navi, the Mitzudais says Yeshovev Inyan Hanocha v'Hashket. The Mitzudis is learning that the word Yeshovev means, just give me 1 second here. Why did my stream? I know Zoom is still working. I just want to see. It looks like my YouTube stream is having a problem. Just bear with me for 1 second. I want to see why. YouTube is not receiving enough video. Why not? OBS is working. Yeah. All right. Whatever it is, hopefully it'll start working again. Okay. So the Mitzudis is learning that Nafshi Yeshovev, he says, Inyan Hanocha v'Hashket, which means at rest. That would mean that Dovid HaMelech is saying, Nafshi Yeshovev, the Rebbeinu Shalom puts my nefesh at rest. Yancheni v'magle tzedek, the Rebbeinu Shalom leads me in just paths. Leman Shemai, for the sake of his name. All right, what exactly does that mean? So it could be that Rashi is learning Yeshovev the same way as the Mitzudais, I'm not sure. Rashi says, Nafshi Yeshovev, what it means is, Ruchi shahufag b'tzaros, my spirit that was troubled with tzaros, with problems and tribulation, Yeshovev l'kadmusai. The Rebbeinu Shalom will restore it to the way it was before. He's learning Yeshovev means more shav, to return, to be restored. But it could be that Rashi and the Mitzudis are close, that it means that he returns my nefesh to rest. I'm not sure. But if you learn the pasuk that way, it seems that what Dovid HaMelech is saying is that the Rebbeinu Shalom, even when a person goes through a difficult time, people do go through difficult times in life, and sometimes, despite the psukim that we saw already here in this kapitel, sometimes a person does go through a rough patch, and it's not easy for him to deal with it well. Dovid HaMelech says you should know that when that happens, Nafshi Yeshovev, the Rebbeinu Shalom helps me out, and he restores me. He builds me back up again. He helps me out, and he gives me the opportunity to restore myself to an at-rest condition, where I should once again be calm and be settled. Okay, that's how I would learn Rashi and the Mitzudais. But there's a very, very nice Reb Shamshon Rafal Hirsch over here. Reb Shamshon Rafal Hirsch learns Nafshi Yeshovev. He says that the lashon of Yeshovev means to return repeatedly. It's the shirish of shav, to return, but Yeshovev means to return again, repeatedly. It seems that he's referring to a cycle. There's a cycle that goes around and around and around. And I think what the pasuk is referring to, according to Rav Shamshon Rafal Hirsch, is really a cycle of life. The truth is that when we talk about these different stages and these different phases in life, it's important for a person to realize that the whole life is a cycle. It goes around and around and around. There are easier times, there are more challenging times. Then there are easier times again, and then sometimes there might be more challenging times again. And all of this cycle, all of this turnover, that too is all in the hands of the Ribbono Shel Olam. Before we said that there's one period of Yarbitzeni, there's another period of Yenahaleni. Now we're taking it to the next level. Nafshi Yeshovev. When I look back over the long haul of life, I see that it's a cycle. And when you see that there's a cycle, what you see also is, you see from your history that the Ribbono Shel Olam was always there for me. I'm going through a challenging time. It's not the first time I went through a challenging time. There were other times in my life that there were challenging times. And every time there was a challenging time, the Ribbono Shel Olam was there for me. If it's the first time you went through a life challenge, it's okay. So maybe you'll say, I don't know. So then, Dovid HaMelech told us in the previous pasuk, okay, you should know that but when you get older, and you go through these different periods, and you've seen the challenges, and you've seen how you grew from the challenges, and you've seen how you got out of the challenges. So now you have to have that realization of Nafshi Yeshovev, that the Ribbono Shel Olam is the one that's controlling the whole cycle. And the Ribbono Shel Olam is the one that brings you into the challenge and brings you out of the challenge. And then he brings you to menuchais, he brings you to a period of tranquility, and then he brings you to a period of challenge again. And then you get out of that challenge, and maybe again you go through a quiet period. And then maybe again you go back into a challenge. And that's exactly the way the Ribbono Shel Olam wants it, because the truth is that you need both. Sometimes you need the periods of challenge because the periods of challenge make you grow. They challenge you and they push you on to the next level. They push you on to the next madrega. They push you to a place where you didn't think you could go. They push you to accomplishments that you didn't think you could accomplish. They push you to face up challenges that you didn't think you could challenge. But sometimes a person can't live challenge after challenge after challenge after challenge. So the Ribbono Shel Olam brings you to a plateau, he brings you to a place, and now he lets you coast a little bit along and accomplish what you can on that madrega. Then you reach another period, the Ribbono Shel Olam says, guess what? Now it's time to grow again. Now I'm going to push you up to the next level. There's a long vart that I have. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. But I always said by Yaakov Avinu, we find by Yaakov Avinu, very fascinating. We find that at different points in his life, he made matzevos, and at different points in his life, he made mizbechos. Sometimes he made a matzeva. In English, you would call a matzeva a monument. And sometimes he made a mizbeach. A mizbeach is an altar. What's the critical difference between a matzeva and a mizbeach? A matzeva, the Chazal tell us, is one stone. It's one complete stone. A mizbeach is built out of multiple stones, and they have different uses. A matzeva is only kosher for nesachim. You want to bring something to the Ribbono Shel Olam, like a carbon on a matzeva, you could only bring a nesech. You could pour wine or oil as a carbon to the Ribbono Shel Olam on a matzeva. On a mizbeach, you could bring a bona fide carbon. You could bring an animal as a carbon. So a mizbeach is a higher madrega. It's a higher level than a matzeva. Why did you sometimes make matzevos and sometimes mizbechos? So I have rayas from the psukim, and I think pshat is like this. I think whenever Yaakov Avinu reached a certain plateau, he made a matzeva. So for example, the first matzeva that we have that Yaakov made was when he was running away from Esav and he came to Har HaMoriah. That was a plateau. Yaakov Avinu was saying, I reached a certain level in my father's house. In Eretz Canaan, in the house of Yitzchak, I reached a certain madrega. And maybe I completed that madrega when I learned for 14 years in the Yeshiva Shem Ve'ever. So I hit a certain plateau. and I'm going to mark that plateau by making a matseva. A matseva is one stone. It does not connote any growth. There is no growth. It's a one complete stone. You can't add anything onto it. If you add a stone to it, now it's no longer a matseva, now it's a mizbeach. So the matseva is one complete finished item. So he marked the plateau by making a matseva. So he said, I reached until here, but now I'm being challenged. Now I got to go to Lavan's house. I know that going to base Lavan is going to represent a major challenge. So first I mark the plateau that I reached. Now I'm going to base Lavan. He went to base Lavan, and in base Lavan, he grew. So then he made him a mizbeach. He made a mizbeach afterwards to show, I grew. And then after he grew, he went back to the matseva to mark that I reached a new plateau. So now I got to mark it with a matseva again. Then he went into other challenges. So he had to make another matseva and another mizbeach. But that's life. Life is this continual cycle. And that's what Dovid HaMelech says here. Nafshi yeshovev. The Rebbeinu Shalom is always turning that wheel. He's always spinning the cycle. And Dovid HaMelech says, you should know it's b'maglei tzedek. He does it in just paths. Now it's very interesting. Where did I find it? In the Malbim. What's maglei? Magal is a path. But the Malbim says that a magal is a particular type of path. And I hope I'm right. I hope I'm not making a foolish mistake. But I think that a ma'agal, mem ayin gimel lamed, is also the Hebrew word that means a scythe. A scythe is that tool that you use to cut down big, tall, standing grass. It's a long handle with a curved blade, a big curved blade. It's called a scythe, S-C-Y-T-H-E. So a magal, the Malbim says, is a crooked, curved, winding path. So Dovid HaMelech says, Yancheni v'maglei tzedek. The Rebbeinu Shalom takes me in circuitous paths. He takes me in curvy, winding paths. But they're maglei tzedek. But they're just and they're straight. What does that mean? We all know, especially if you use Waze, we all know that sometimes the straight path is not the fastest path. Sometimes the straight path is not the quickest, it's not the safest, it's not the best. Sometimes the best path is a crooked path, because the crooked path goes around the traffic, the crooked path goes around the construction, the crooked path might go around a bad neighborhood. I remember one time when I was coming back from Philly, and it was in the early days of GPS, and the GPS told me, wow, see Marsha smiling, wow, I have such a great way to go over here, I could save so much time. And then I went through that area, and I'm suddenly in a third world country with boarded up houses, and oh my gosh, it was such a Shrek. I didn't stop by red lights. I just went straight. I wasn't stopping anywhere. So sometimes the straight path is not the right path. So the Rebbeinu Shalom takes you b'maglei. He takes you in curvy, circuitous, funny paths. But they're maglei tzedek. They're just and they're straight, because the Rebbeinu Shalom knows exactly what's good for you, and he knows exactly what's right for you, and he knows exactly what makes you tick, and exactly what's going to make you grow. So when you see the nafshi yeshovev, you have to realize the Rebbeinu Shalom is turning the wheel, and he's turning that cycle, and sometimes you're going in funny directions, in funny ways, but realize that the Rebbeinu Shalom is doing it, and that it's maglei tzedek. It's straight, just paths that will bring you exactly where you need to go. These are beautiful, beautiful psukim in a beautiful, beautiful kapitel. Mirz Hashem, I think next week we'll continue with this beautiful kapitel, and I hope that we absorb. Remember, I'm always speaking to myself. I hope that we all can absorb these lessons. And the schus, I keep on saying, the schus of limud HaTorah should stand Gans Klal Yisroel in good stead. The Rebbeinu Shalom should be Megan. He should protect Gans Klal Yisroel. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshuas and Refuas and Parnasa and everything that everybody needs to everybody in need. The Rebbeinu Shalom is the Raya of Klal Yisroel. He's the Shepherd of Klal Yisroel. So that means that this is a tremendous amount of encouragement for us. All the turmoil that we see and everything that we see that looks very difficult and very hard, the Rebbeinu Shalom is the Roya Neman. The Rebbeinu Shalom is a trustworthy shepherd. He's doing his role. He's shepherding us. He's totally dedicated to caring for us. And Hakol B'Yadai, everything is in his hands. So he's pulling the strings and he's doing it exactly in the best way possible, exactly the way things should be. It's not that it should be better. It's not that it should be different. It is exactly 1,000% the way the Rebbeinu Shalom knows that it has to be, and it has to be that way for our benefit. So the Rebbeinu Shalom is taking care of us. The Rebbeinu Shalom should continue to take care of us. We can always be mispal, that the Rebbeinu Shalom should make it easier for us, that we have a right to be mispal. The Rebbeinu Shalom wants our tefillas. So we could be mispal. Rebbeinu Shalom, if it's hard, the Rebbeinu Shalom should make it easy. We could ask that of the Rebbeinu Shalom. And the best way the Rebbeinu Shalom could do that for us is bring the Bias Gael Tzedek B'Meher V'Yameinu. That way we won't need any of this anymore. We should go to Eretz Yisrael. We should have a bias. We should have the Beis HaMikdash. We should have Karbonos. We should have everything else. We should have HaMelech for Malchus, Beis David. And everything should be wonderful for all of us. Be well.
Thank you, Rabbi. Good Shabbos. Thank you.
There we go. I hear you, Richard. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
I hope
Thank you, Rabbi Weiss.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
I have to tell you the funny.
Rabbi Weiss.
My pleasure,
Rabbi
ma'am.
Weiss?
Thank you. Yeah.
Rabbi Weiss, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, so anyway, so when I was modeling about Philly, because I had directions from a Shmuel how to get